Discover the best-kept secrets from the leading entrepreneurs across the globe. Learn from the greatest minds in business with the MyCoda Podcast. Here's your host, Sam Payne.
Okay, what's up? Welcome to the MyCoda Podcast, and thank you for joining us for another session today. Now, you are going to be so grateful you tuned in today, because today's guest is James Camp of Tipping Point Agency, and James gave so much value in today's interview. James is a specialist. What he does, he's a specialist in digital strategy and consulting, paid advertising campaigns, social media management, web product development. When it comes to social media marketing and advertising, when it comes to SEO optimizations, AdWords, James is just the absolute guru when it comes to this, and he's been doing this for a long time now, and he's working with a lot of very large companies, running huge campaigns worth millions to the companies. And he was kind enough to come on today, and he gave us over an hour of his time where he just kept dropping knowledge bomb after knowledge bomb on exactly how he helps these companies and how he can help you. And in the interview, we cover everything from up-and-coming social media platforms that we should be utilizing to Facebook, to Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. James is passionate about Snapchat, and he loves Snapchat, and he goes into a lot of detail as well in this interview, guys. So it is well worth getting your notepads and pens out, because if you're struggling like most of the entrepreneurs out there today who can't quite grasp social media, who can't quite grasp advertising and marketing on these platforms, then pin your ears back and listen in today, because James just offers a ton of value, which I know is going to help you. So I'm going to leave the intro here, guys. Here is session 007 of the MyCoda Podcast with James Camp. Hi, James. How are we doing today?
I'm fantastic. A little stressed out as always, but fantastic.
Good. Well, I appreciate you're very busy, so I do appreciate you coming on today and giving us some of your time. For the guys out there who may not be familiar with you, could you just introduce yourself and what it is you do?
Yeah, I'm James Camp. I am, I guess by trade, a digital strategist, a strategy consultant, and I own a digital marketing agency that specializes in growth hacking and user acquisitions for SMEs. So what that means is, for small and medium-sized enterprises in general, we try and identify target audiences and very cost-effectively bring in those audiences for these small and medium-sized enterprises. But that said, we have some kind of larger blue-chip multinational clients, but in general, the passion is for entrepreneurs.
Awesome. And that is perfect for our audience, because this podcast is based on business startups and guys literally starting out in their entrepreneurial journey. Let's talk about you for a second. I mean, what change took place in you that made you decide you wanted to become an entrepreneur and start your own business?
I think, very transparently, I've been very entrepreneurial from quite a young age. And I actually had, by chance, I ran into some success at what I would consider quite a young age, about 19 years old. And I sold a company, right? And that kind of gave me enough excitement for all of this to kind of keep at it for a very long time. But I think that for most people, they don't have that opportunity. I grew up a fantastic family, very, very standardly middle class in New York City. And I saw kind of two ends of the spectrum. And I saw there was, in New York, it's a big melting pot. So there's a lot of haves and there's a lot of have-nots. And I truly, truly desperately wanted to be a have, like desperately. So the first kind of entrepreneurial endeavor I really, really have a recollection of was, there was a high school I went to where I saw everyone selling candy for the basketball team. And I wasn't on the basketball team at this school. And I went online and I found the same boxes of candy that the basketball team was selling. And I bought them myself. I think I borrowed my mother's credit card or something, because this must have been 15 years ago, more. And I would cut class, and I'd stay in the lunchroom every single day for 4 lunch periods straight, just selling candy, pretending I was part of the basketball team. And then I started a blog just for fun. I had a couple of articles by chance go viral on StumbleUpon and Dig, which back in the day, they were really big kind of platforms. And I had AdSense ads on there, and I think I made like $20 because they went viral, and I cannot tell you how ecstatic I was. like it was mind blowing. That I could make money from space and how I kind of did it. Yeah, from thin air, from my little Toshiba laptop. So from there, like I kind of dove headfirst into the online money making community, which can be a pretty nefarious community. And I got involved in affiliate marketing, and I started running a bunch of different affiliate offers. And then from there, I saw that there was middlemen really between myself and advertisers, and those were CPA networks or affiliate networks. So I started an affiliate network with a partner, and we grew that pretty aggressively. And one of the fantastic things about the digital world is, no one had to know that I was an 18-year-old kid sitting in my mother's apartment on 83rd and Broadway in Manhattan. And then we got acquired by a company called Empire Media, and that was really exciting for me. So that was kind of my first, falling in love with entrepreneurship.
Yeah, that's great, man. That's great. And I mean, back when you started, social media wasn't so big, I suppose, but now it is absolutely huge. It is everywhere. And I think part of the confusion is there's so many platforms people can utilize. I mean, do you feel that certain platforms suit certain niches or industries over others?
Yeah, absolutely. With that said, I think that, if you've got a strong following on any platform, it's relatively, easy is not the word, but it's important to kind of cater to an audience that you already have that's there, right? I think that if we're talking about B2B services, business to business, that LinkedIn is very often the home for that, especially, SaaSs, like software as a service. But I think in general, if you are running a news site, I'd say probably Facebook or Twitter is your home. That's applicable for kind of satire news like The Onion, or that could be gossip, but anything along those lines. And then if you have a product or a lifestyle brand that's incredibly aesthetically pleasing and beautiful, Pinterest is your home, or Instagram is your home, right? And then there's a bunch of other ones. I'm super aggressive about Snapchat these days. I'm trying to figure out how to make it work for everyone. And then there's lots of little ancillary ones out there that I think people find exciting, like Musical.ly, for example.
Yeah, and I definitely want to touch on Snapchat a bit later on in the interview. But before we get into that, I mean, do you feel that like the most popular platforms like Facebook and Instagram are always the most beneficial for people to use when they're starting out, or should they also focus on the up-and-coming platforms as well?
I actually think the exact opposite. I think that they should be focusing on the up-and-coming platforms. I can tell you right now, without getting into my personal finances, I mean, we do quite well. But if I had been aggressively on Instagram in the way that we are today, 6 years ago, we would be doing. We wouldn't even be having this conversation. It would just be. It's astronomical. So I think that you take a bit of risk by being involved in the beginning, because obviously that startup is taking risk as well. You don't know if they're going to last. But if you can be one of the earlier people on board, if you can get what people call OG usernames, like if you owned cars on Instagram, right? You're one of the first people on Instagram. You could just sell cars, just the username, for a couple $100,000 to a ton of brands, right? So I think it's important to be diving into Facebook. If you're brand new right now, I would think is terrifying. And I think that I'm incredibly aggressive on kind of newer platforms. I'm always keeping the eye out for things like Peach, Musical.ly, things that like are gaining traction with a slightly younger demo. Because if you have the time to build something up for a year or two, those people are going to become consumers, and they're going to really trust your brand by that point.
Yeah, that's awesome advice. And while we're on the subject of new platforms, you mentioned Peach and Musical.ly. I mean, are there any other up-and-coming platforms people should be looking out for at the minute and looking to use with their personal and business brands?
I think there's a lot out there. There's one that Twitter, there's Periscope, right? I think that the reality is, unless you're doing something completely different. Peach, for example, I find Peach really exciting, although I think that Peach is ahead of the curve. I don't think that it's, I think that I would pay attention to it, but I would maybe dive in on it a little bit later, because I think it's on wobbly legs, because it's difficult for people to understand, I think, right?
Yeah.
I think the idea is to start very simple, and then you can expand. As we've seen with Snapchat recently, they've really changed how they work, right?
Yeah.
But, in all honesty, can I think of any off the top of my head? There's so many out there, but when you're looking for social networks to kind of hop on board with, I think one thing that's important, if you're really serious about it, is to look at who the CEO is, who the CTO is, who's backed it, which VC firms have funded it. I mean, this is a little bit more in depth than the average person is going to do, but a lot of my faith in Peach comes from, I think, the original CEO of Twitter is now the CEO of Peach, right? Yeah. So that kind of gives me a lot of faith in someone having an understanding of that space. But I think that, I would there's about 5 kind of major ones out there, and if you are creative, you can be involved with like Musical.ly and Snapchat and stuff. And I wouldn't go diving really too deep, unless you've got a true understanding of social and how to build an audience from nothing. I wouldn't go too deep into looking into brand new things that you don't know anyone is on.
Yeah. And I mean, one person which I've been following for quite a few years now and always gets it right every single time is Gary Vaynerchuk.
I knew that's what you were going to say. Absolutely.
It calls it every time, right? Every single time he gets it.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. So he's really good with identifying social, right? I mean, we could get into a myriad of things about Gary Vaynerchuk. I think that hustle culture. I think hustle culture is all kind of bullshit. I think, excuse my language. And I know that he's very big on that. I'm all for working hard, but I have problems with that. But yeah, he's great at identifying that stuff. But what you'll also see is that he's great at identifying and being bullish on things that he's an early investor in. Now, of course, he's only going to invest in things he believes in, right? Yeah. But at the same time, you will hear him talk about Snapchat every single day on the Daily V, right? And I know he got in early on Snapchat. I know he was early on Twitter. These are things that he will talk about and kind of push. It is on his agenda, but he's got a great barometer, I guess, of kind of identifying that stuff for sure. I mean, listen, if that's advice, go listen to the Daily V. Go check, follow Gary Vaynerchuk. He is really tapped into that world.
I think Pat Flynn as well. He's always got the up and coming sort of social platforms and software that's coming out on his podcast as well. I mean, he's always in and amongst the people that bring stuff out.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the trick is, what you and I are both really getting to is that it's like identify. There's only so many inputs I have access to or you have access to, right? And this is what I do for a living. I know this world incredibly well. With that said, Gary Vaynerchuk, for example, is getting access to pitches, is getting access to seed rounds, is getting to things that you and I don't have access to seeing. Yeah. And so I think it's important to kind of take lead in that regard, right? And kind of keep an eye out for that stuff.
Okay. Now, before we go into the social media platforms too much in depth, I want to talk about something which I know a lot of people are asking questions about, and that's social media automation tools like Edgar and Buffer, for example. Yeah. Do you feel that these are an effective way to utilize social media, given these platforms are designed for authentic human interaction? Like, is there a place for these tools on social media?
Absolutely. With that said, I want to make a very clear distinction in this, right? So I think that, when we talk about Buffer, I mean, we personally use Hootsuite a lot, right? We're really talking about the same type of thing as Buffer. Yes, I think it's important to be able to automate certain things that you're doing. With that said, there are programs out there that will automate everything you do, that will automate interaction with potential audiences. And I'm a firm believer against them, partially because they're against the terms of service of these social networks. I've got a pretty good understanding of what kind of the limits are, and I would feel confident using it if I needed to, but I wouldn't. Anything that's like liking all your photos for you and following everything for you and just posting everything for you, it's against the terms of service of Instagram or Twitter or Facebook. And one thing that I think is important for people to understand is that you don't really own your Instagram profile, right? Like Instagram owns that profile. And so if you, for any reason, have upset Instagram, which is owned by Facebook now, right? Like they can take that away from you. Yeah. Right. And so they can easily ban that. You could take it. You could do whatever you want. That's in their terms of service that you've agreed to when you signed up, is that they own it and that they can, get rid of it as see fit. So yes, I think there's a home for it as you grow, as you scale. I think that if you're just starting out, if you're a solopreneur or even a very small business owner, that's something that you can really handle on your own. I think it's important to really be tapped in directly to your community and engage with them directly, as opposed to just searching, tracking keywords to kind of then go make a comment on and stuff like that,
I think that's great advice. I mean, one story that actually comes to mind when you spoke about that Instagram was, I was speaking to a girl who was actually, she's very good on Instagram. She's got a great account, and she was talking about Instagress, the automated, it responds, doesn't it? It likes, follows, and responds and comments.
Yeah.
And one of her followers put a post up about a dead dog. And then it automatically went, great post, love it. And people were like, dude, what are you doing?
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, in the, without really getting to this side of things, there is if you really want to think about creatively gaining new clients and audience, right? It would be quite easy for someone to post pictures of a dead dog under certain hashtags and just wait for Instagram to go like and comment on those, and then to go email them and to email that account owner and be like, hey, I can see I can see that your social media manager has liked a picture of a dead dog and said how wonderful. Surely you let us pitch you on. But
that's another interview, I think.
Yeah, that's a whole different interview. But no, so in all honesty, yeah, I think that's a perfect example of some of the problems that exist.
Yeah.
So, I mean, very transparently, without getting into the nuances of social media and understanding audiences and really what interactions to do, things like Instagram actually do most of what needs to be done to grow an audience. The thing is, people like to pretend they're busier than they are. Okay. Yeah. So, what you are paying for with Instagram seems like a great deal because I think you're getting away with 25 cents a day or something for that, But the reality is, if you go do that by hand, and this actually, without giving away everything we do, this is a lot of what my company does, is we take those processes that Instagram will automate, and we actually do them by hand. You'll see a significantly better response. You won't see any bans that come from the social media networks, and you'll make sure not to make huge mistakes like the story you just told.
Yeah. Loving the dead dog.
Yeah, that's so bad, And the thing the other reality too is that if you just put on Instagram and you don't ever touch it, right? You might gain an audience slowly, but a lot of them are going to not be the right audience. And not only that, it would be very apparent to somebody like me that you are using Instagram. And anyone, when you start using social media as a KPI, as a key performance indicator, or as a metric that you want to approach VC firms with, and they start auditing social media profiles of you, they're going to start seeing that you're not really running things correctly. The core competencies of your business are not truly there in many regards.
Yeah, I think, I'm by no means a social media expert, but even I can spot when someone comments on my photos, I know they're using Instagram. It's just so obvious. It's so out of context.
Yeah, I mean, and you can see when someone, let's be honest, there's a lot of following, unfollowing is really, if you can identify the right audience and the right photos and the right times to do it, can be a fantastic way of gaining an audience. Yeah. With that said, if you just throw on Instagram, you'll be following 7,500 people and have about 1,000 people following you back pretty soon. It's pretty obvious to me that you're not truly interacting with that audience yourself, because no one wants even 7,500 people in their feed. It's going to be a bunch of irrelevant information for you anyway.
Yeah. Cool. And let's move on. Let's talk about the platforms themselves, and let's start with the big one, Facebook. What are the pros and cons on Facebook?
So Facebook is really interesting to me, because what's happening is Facebook is becoming what I call the gray lady, the old gray lady, the New York Times of social media, the kind of big powerhouse that people use it, it's really trusted, but it's not on the cutting edge, and people and they're changing, and the times are changing, right? So Facebook, I can tell you the type of content that really performs well on Facebook. Quizzes, visual content always does really well. There's something that's called the curiosity gap. And that is really applicable as Facebook content. So what you'll see is a lot of BuzzFeed articles, a lot of these viral Nova articles that say 14 things you didn't know about blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Or 12 of the most beautiful destinations you've never heard of before, right? And so that really is playing on what we call the curiosity gap. So that's the type of content that does particularly well on Facebook.
Yeah.
Linking out to blog articles of that kind of that kind of sort. But really, the pros are if you have an established audience or if you have an ad spend, if you have a budget to spend, Facebook can be fantastic for you. But it's at this stage in Facebook, the traditional ways of just building a page and reaching your audience are almost impossible without having money to spend on reaching that audience, right? And that's because Facebook knows that that's what people want to do. Now, with that said, in their quest to kind of change with the times, Facebook Live is really exciting, I think.
Yeah.
Because just the reach that it has, if you go on Facebook Live, I believe it lets every single person on your friends list know if they're online that you just signed into Facebook Live. So talk about a huge amount of reach that just doesn't exist from your page. We're at, I think, 1% or less these days for a business page. And then my kind of, ace up my sleeve trick about kind of Facebook, and then this is what I'd say if anyone was going to dive into Facebook without an audience that exists, is I would forget pages and I'd do a group. I think Facebook groups accomplish two things for you. They accomplish kind of beating algorithmically what Facebook is kind of hiding your content with the pages. So they allow, with a Facebook group, if somebody posts in a group with a group posts, that goes out to a much wider audience of people that are actually there. A, and B, and this is a kind of a trick, groups you can invite people to. You can add them. Facebook pages you have to invite people to. With groups, you can just add people to a group. Now, I wouldn't go crazy on that because you don't want to add all your friends to a group that's completely irrelevant to them. But it means that you don't have to spend money gaining your audience right off the bat. And you can also kind of interact with them more directly and get a better feel of what they're actually interested in.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I mean, there's so many people on Facebook. I think it's got over 1 billion users now, which is just crazy. So how often, should people be posting on Facebook to ensure that they're staying on the radar of their followers? Because one post a day, you're just going to get lost in that newsfeed. No one's going to see you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, when it comes to that question, I would actually apply this to the overwhelming majority of social networks. We can use it for Facebook. That applies to the overwhelming majority. Yeah, okay. I would really look at, first of all, anyone has to be posting at least once a day. You have to. Now, whether it's your content or content that you've not stolen, but curated, from another source and you've given them credit, you have to be posting at least once a day. I would really jump in the 3+ range. I wouldn't do 10 articles a day. I think that's kind of egregious, But the 3 to 5 seems to be a good spot. Now, what you're going to see, the more posts you do, you will end up losing some followers that feel like you're just inundating their newsfeed. With that said, if I gain 100 followers and lose 30 or fans, right? Because those 30 that think that I've inundated them with content, they probably weren't going to be purchasers of my product anyway. Right, so my net gain is it's in the black, right? It's better for me to be posting more content and trimming the fat, so to speak, of those people that aren't actually there and interested in my content.
And if you've got to post so much content, say for example you've got Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, you've got all those 3 accounts going on. What are your thoughts on using the same content across multiple platforms?
My thoughts are that if you have the bandwidth or the manpower their different content does perform better on different platforms. But I will say that if you are hiring someone and you only have a budget for one thing, or you truly don't have the time to do multiple things, here's one automation example I do approve of. For instance, if you truly only have 30 minutes a day, an hour a day, whatever, and you really want to give it all to Instagram, I would set up an IFTTT formula, right? And that is if this, then that. And so what that would do is that every time I post to Instagram, it will then, you can set up so it natively posts that to Twitter as well, and natively post that to your Facebook page as well. Now, I don't love that as the only solution, but I think that, for instance, if you're going to spend most of your time in one social network and you only have a little bit of unique, original content to post to the others, I would still supplement it Instagram's a great one to supplement because images do well on all platforms.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that your tweets should go on your Facebook page. I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say your tweet should be on your Instagram page. But I would say that if you've got an Instagram that you're actively involved in, that I don't think that there's a problem with sharing that content on your Facebook and your Twitter as well, because just that type of content does well across all platforms.
And another hot topic that's always discussed when I'm speaking about social media with people is making the content truly native to that platform. So optimizing every image for Instagram I think it's like 1,000 something pixels. I can't remember what it is off the top of my head. But they basically optimize every single image for every single platform. I mean, it's an effective way to make sure it's really in the right place, but it's time consuming, right? So what would your advice be to guys that do want to get across these platforms but haven't really got the time to get into say Canva, for example, and just optimize 100 different images for all their posts?
Yeah, well, I mean, so first of all, I think Canva, I have zero affiliation with the Canva in any way, but I want to give it like the biggest plug on the face of this planet.
It's awesome. It's such a good tool.
It's amazing. Canva has disrupted the graphic design industry in the same way that Wix and Squarespace have disrupted the web design industry. And with that said, I'm not saying that a fantastic web designer isn't amazing or that a great graphic designer isn't amazing. But if you don't have the budget, Canva. But to go back to what you asked, so I'm a firm believer in VAs. If you do have a little bit of budget, I get really excited about VAs, virtual assistants. And as someone who's constantly traveling, I've done back and forth to Asia 4 times in the past 12 months. Yes, there are cultural differences, but let's be real. Intellect doesn't change where you are in the world, right? And you can absolutely find really high quality talent in places that just economically are much worse off than where you live. If you live in a developed country, that's not very PC to say first world, right? So if that's a perfect example, you could find a great VA on Upwork, for example, Elance, any of these sites that can do that for you, and will probably do it for, I think in USD, but if we're talking about USD, $3 or $4 an hour, so something that you can maybe accomplish for $20 or $30, you might get if we're talking about images, you might get a month's worth of images done, and that's fantastic.
Yeah.
And then if all else fails, I would really just make sure that you have the highest quality images, probably under 5 megabytes, which I think is some of the limits for some social networks where we can upload. But you're never going to do badly with a really, really, really high quality image. And I can tell you that, on a visual heavy social media platform like Pinterest or Instagram, for example, having, a medium quality image versus high quality resolution wise will make an astronomical difference to engagement.
Yeah. I'm about to release a blog post, actually. I've just studied the top 21 influencers on Instagram at the minute. And what was incredible was the second guy, his name's Zach King. He posts 3 bits of content a week, but his videos it's the best content I've seen. I'm not even going to lie to you. It's amazing the stuff he puts together. He's got over 14 million followers and his engagement rate is 12.9%. Which is crazy for the amount of, as little as he's posting.
Yeah, so here's the reality. So, and if we want to throw it in, if there's a free moment, I can give some fantastic tips to increase engagement for people, kind of growth hacks. But so what you'll see is that as your following rises, your engagement will kind of come down a bit, right? Like we can do with startups 4,000 or 5,000 followers, I can do 25% engagement across the board, right? But as you start hitting 50,000, 500,000, 5 million, it's just naturally going to drop.
Yeah, of course.
And I believe the person you're talking about, I think he sells some courses on Wolf of Instagram or something. Well, I don't want to give him a plug, but so here's
brilliant. He deserves it, man.
Well, so here's the reality, right? There's two kind of trains of thought, and I have to tell you, I'm a marketer much more than I am a creative. Okay. And I grew up as a solopreneur before I ever had partners or before I ever had employees or anything. And I had to figure out how to do everything on my own. So there's 2 kind of ways to do it. You can either produce the highest quality original content out there, or you can really learn to figure out what an audience wants to consume, and you can feed them what they want and let it be from other people. Just make sure you cite them and give them credit correctly. And I happen to fall into the marketer mindset, which is, because for so long it was just me, and I'm not a creative content creator. I like to do what I call content curation.
Yeah.
Right. As opposed to creation. So, there's tons of Instagram profiles that I run for clients that are literally just other people's content, but cited correctly, giving them credit. And we get comments all the time. Thank you so much for sharing my posts. Like, let me know if I can give you a shout out. People want their stuff to be shared as long as they're given credit for it. So when you talk about this guy, Zach King, if you are a creative or you have the money to have a creative team behind you, then sure, tone down the amount of content you put out and only put out the highest quality stuff out there. But if you're starting out on a super lean budget, don't be afraid to take other people's stuff. Just make sure that you give them the correct credit, because that's all they want,
That's great advice. That really is amazing advice. And I want to just touch on Facebook one last time before we move on.
Yeah, please.
Ads. It's a very controversial subject. People are slating them all the time on Facebook, saying they don't work. I think it's just because they don't know how to use them, personally. But do they work?
Absolutely, Facebook ads work. Like, unequivocally, absolutely work. With that said, I want to make it clear there are different things I would use Facebook ads for than other ad platforms. Okay, so when we talk about advertising, and I'm not a huge PPC or pay-per-click guy these days, but I have spent a lot of time in that industry in the past, or even any sort of traffic. We talk about commercial intent. So the commercial intent of a Facebook user is not astronomically high. Meaning they are not in a buying mindset when they are on Facebook. They're much more likely to sign up for your funnel for a free product and that you can sell them later on down the line. Yeah. But direct selling on Facebook does not work as well. Pinterest has a significantly higher commercial intent. Instagram has a higher commercial intent, believe it or not. But so with Facebook, yes, it's possible to sell directly. Click an ad, you get to a web store, you buy something. Yes, that's possible. But I would tell people that you will do significantly better bringing an audience in with your content and then selling to them later on down the line. And again, that could be through a funnel where you're collecting an email address. That could be that you run a news website where people are going to click 4 pages through and then they're going to click an ad. There's a reason that those news websites are, just selling ad space like crazy, because later on is when people are making that purchasing, not so much directly from Facebook. So do Facebook ads work? Absolutely, 100%. I know that you and I met through Founder Club. Fantastic group for anyone who's not aware of it. And I saw somebody post a while back about a Facebook ad they ran, and they were really excited about the amount of reach that it got. And I think it's very important for people to understand that just because tons of people saw your ad, right, doesn't mean that tons of people signed up for your ad. Or are interested in it. Yeah. Right. So I think it's important to remember, like, I would rather target 500 people that are really interested in my ad and engaged with it and signed up than target 50,000 people, and hope that works out.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, because one thing that I was always taught to look for from the offer was the cost per clicks on every ad.
Yeah.
So what would be, for guys that are starting out, say, for example, they've got a budget of £10 a day, a relatively low budget. What would be a good conversion rate for clicks to be looking for on, say, a product or a service they're trying to advertise at the time?
Okay, so, this is going to be really, really general. I just want to preface it with that because every product's going to be different, and we could really get into the details of like different ways of targeting audiences, and that's a whole, like with the graph search, and you used to be able to target user IDs, like very specific people. But in general, I would say that a decently performing ad on Facebook has a CTR of 0.1 and above.
Right. Okay.
Right. So that means that one in 1,000 people are clicking on your ad.
Okay.
And so that's a good baseline metric. With that said, you could have an ad that 1 in 100,000 people clicked on, and was still profitable for you, or you can have an ad that was much higher. But that's a good. When I was really involved with promoting affiliate offers, which is other people's products and getting a commission on that through Facebook, the baseline metric that we would use was 0.1. We dropped any ads that performed below 0.1 on the click-through rate.
Yeah, I suppose it depends the value of your product as well and everything else.
Absolutely. So if we're talking about mesothelioma law attorneys, right? They will pay $200 a click, because they know that if they get enough people that want to have a lawsuit about mesothelioma, and the average settlement size is $240 million, it really does just depend on what your product is,
I was speaking to someone, I was out on Tuesday night, in fact, speaking to someone, and they spend $50,000 in one day just to test an ad. 50 grand in one day. I mean, that's a huge budget. They're selling ridiculous products, but I thought that was just a crazy example.
It's astronomical. Well, so here's the thing, though. So some of the larger clients I work with, and I won't even say them, but I mean, just some larger kind of blue chip, multi-billion-dollar companies, right? When I've done competitor research for them, like PPC budget research, you see millions and millions of dollars are being spent every month. Millions of dollars. And a lot of those also just trying to get brand recognition, right? I mean, that's like Coca-Cola just wants people to know Coca-Cola. They're not trying to sell you a can of Coke through Google.
Yeah.
But, with that said, people, and to deviate a little bit, and people talk about paid advertising. I know a lot of people that spend $10 on Facebook or £10 on Facebook, £10 on Pinterest, £10 on LinkedIn, and then £10 on Google. And they say, I don't know, I just spent £50. And I haven't gotten any results. I would say that you're better off spending all £50 on one social network and really testing that and finding a campaign that works for you than you are in spreading it out and spreading, very, very thin.
Yeah. And again, I think that's great advice for everybody. And to be fair, when I started out, I used to do that. I'm kind of cringing when you're saying that. Okay, let's move on to Instagram. One of the main issues I'm always been talked to about is people don't really feel like it's a good platform for business because they can't insert direct links or many call to actions. I mean, the only link's in the bio, and people struggle to get people back to that link in the bio. So what would your advice be to the guys out there that are using Instagram but are struggling to convert people and bring them into a sales funnel, for example, or an email sequence?
Okay, so there's multiple things to touch on there. One is that Instagram is now starting to roll out business pages, right? So, and you'll see them if you're scrolling through Instagram. You'll start looking at people's profiles. You'll see some of the business ones have at the top, not just a button that says you're following, but also a button that says contact, right? So that's one of the options, right? And then that will allow you to email them. And so that's another place to basically have a call to action button, right? But so I think with Instagram, you really want to tell, again, it depends on your product price and what your budget is like in social media and just in every regard. But you really want to tell a story. You want to stay really consistent with your imagery. And then you want to be telling people, you want to have your link in your bio and tell them to go and click on it, right? And the reality is that, again, going back to, I said commercial intent before, if I can get you to click on my link on Instagram, you're much more likely to follow through or something than just to click is on Facebook, because it's taking you a lot more to get there. And the other thing to really remember, and I have to explain this to clients sometimes, is that it takes on average a consumer 7 points of contact before they become a purchaser, right? So if we talk about email series follow-ups, it's going to be 7 emails they actually read before they ever decide to buy your product. Okay, so just because somebody follows you on Instagram and they haven't purchased from you that day they became your follower or that week they became your follower has no bearing on whether they are going to become a user or customer of yours in the future. Yeah. It may take them a month of seeing that you produce really high quality content or content that they get excited about to then actually click that link and to buy. So I think people get discouraged because, very often for clients, we're fantastic at gaining audiences really quickly. And people are like, oh, well, we gained 5,000 new followers last month, but we only sold 10 extra, well, give those people a little bit of time to become customers.
Yeah, of course.
So I would say that, one thing that we do very often for brands is we'll have the first part of the caption, which is the kind of witty or clever part that is completely relevant to that post, right? And not just hard selling them. And then we'll do, like a strike through line below it, and then and underneath that comes a call to action, right? So that what they see is the preview when they're scrolling through their feed is like a friendly, witty, kind of clever post that they're interested in and engages with them. And if they want to read more, they've clicked the more button, right? And then they might actually see that call to action later on. and get them to kind of, go to the bio and click through there.
Yeah, awesome advice. And one thing that is blatantly obvious when I'm looking for Instagram feeds is the use of stock images. What are your views on using stock images over your own images in feeds? I mean, do you feel it's good to use both or just utilize one or the other? I
very recently did a test for a client we work with that is they're a fantastic snack company. They're an alternative to hummus bean protein dip. They just got funded and they're fantastic. Beautiful food, taste amazing, and fantastic in every way. We had talked about using, because they are pre-launch. I mean, we've got prototypes of their food and stuff, but they're not in stores and stuff, and yet. We talked about using kind of stock imagery and tips or notes about, vegan lifestyle or different types of proteins and stuff. And to be quite honest with you, we saw that it didn't work really well for that. I think that if you are in a niche where you have the opportunity to find beautiful content, again, going back to it, I would borrow it from other people and give them credit, as opposed to just use stock images. Don't get me wrong. There's tons of beautiful stock images. Most of them are not free,
Yeah.
And I think that's important to realize. If you have a little bit of a budget and you don't mind spending a little bit of money, stock imagery can be great. It works a lot for the quote, all the quote profiles, all the motivational profiles, even though it's a bit saturated at this point, people do very well with that. Like I wouldn't suggest someone go out tomorrow and make a business motivation one if they aren't already ingrained in that space at all. But yeah, you can use stock photos, but I would use ones that you pay for. You're pretty unlikely, Alternatively, and I'll check right now, on Google, there is a way to image search, and I may have to send you this later, but a way to image search royalty-free images through Google search.
Yeah, I mean, I think Pixabay is a massive one which people use for free images, but there's not tons on there, so you kind of see the same images all the time cropping up in your newsfeed.
Right. Well, I mean, there's also, let's be honest, there's there's definitely two kinds of stock images.
Yeah.
My father actually owned a stock photography agency for his entire life, so I'm pretty well versed, right? There are the ones that are like beautiful, stock photos of, one of his photographers was the Kennedy family personal photographer, right? Those are kind of, they're beautiful stock photos. They're very specific, right? Yeah. And then there are ones that are just like, okay, let's make a really awkward model pose incredibly awkwardly, hold the telephone. Like, oh, this is a business phone call,
Yeah.
And I would try and stay away from that stuff. I mean, again, I think you need content. Stuff has to be there, but I would stay pretty far away from that if I could.
Yeah. Okay, and for someone just starting out, they've just set up an Instagram account, they've just launched their business, they want to get their social media platforms up and running. What would be the best way for them to go from 0 followers and start getting the best initial traction possible and start building a good following?
Okay, so there's a lot of ways that people do this. And I think that like the most sort of what I would call white hat, straightforward way to do this would be that I would say in 2016, everyone has a Facebook, right? Has a personal Facebook page. Yeah. That's safe to assume. I mean, and at least there's a couple hundred friends on it. So the first thing that I would do is I would connect my Facebook to my Instagram. And what that actually does is that lets everyone of your friends on Facebook that has an Instagram account, and it notifies them that your Facebook friend, blah, 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 is now on Instagram as whatever your username is, right? And I think that's a great way to actually gain a good chunk of initial followers that actually probably have pretty decent engagement because those people personally know you and are probably personally invested in you doing well with your brand. They're excited for you. Yeah. So that's the first way I do it. I actually would do that a couple times. I would do that, and then I would do it again in a month, reconnect it again in a month because it re-notifies everyone again. And there's certain people, when we talk about several contacts before someone becomes a customer, that's relatively applicable for a follower as well. Yeah. So that's a great way to do it. I would really, taking a page out of Gary Vaynerchuk's, book here, leverage the following you already have as much as possible into forms of new media. right? And I think that becomes super applicable with Snapchat, where there is no discover feature. There is no way to add people, to finding people and add, not on the surface at least. But yeah, I would say if you're starting a new Instagram or new Twitter or new anything, really, really, really use what you have already. Use what you have at your disposal. And everyone's got a Facebook today. If you don't, I'm sure you've got a MySpace or a Friendster from 20 years ago sitting around, and I would leverage those,
Or a phone book, I don't know.
Yeah, or a phone book. I mean, I think that people, it's funny because I think that people discredit email and discredit phone calls and discredit, talking to people. I spent a large part of my life as a nightclub promoter, and really high-end nightclubs in New York, Paris, and Miami. And that is I can tell you the good promoters, and they're good image promoters that bring a very beautiful crowd that spends good money. They are not posting on Facebook. You're not posting your party on Facebook. That's the way you reach a kind of wider audience that doesn't follow you specifically, right? You're getting on the phone, you're texting people 20 texts a day. How was your day? How was your casting? How was your lunch? Get on the phone. You want to build an audience? Call up some of your friends. Be like, hey, it means a lot to me. Follow me here. I'm really serious. I think that, I said I'm not a firm believer in hustle culture, but I do think a lot of my generation, our generation, thinks that things come easier. I think you just got to, back in the day, people, you were dialing on a phone till your fingers bled if you wanted to sell something.
You were actually being people and contacting people.
Yeah. I think that's lost a lot these days, And I think that's a great example of how social media should be done. Whether you're talking to an audience of 1 million or an audience of 1, you should be trying to speak directly to that consumer.
Yeah.
I think that's really important. And to not forget that those consumers are invested in your brand. Now, when we talk about community management, managing a community of 100 or growing a community of 100 to 10,000 is astronomically different than dealing with 1 million followers or 1 million person community. Astronomically. In fact, that's like saying, I can tell you I'm a great CEO for a 7-figure company, right? But when we start hitting 8, 9, 10 figures, if I can get to the point my company is worth $500 million, I will not be running it because it is literally just a different skill set.
Yeah, of course.
But the one thing I think that is really important with social is to always try and speak directly to your audience, no matter the size. You really want to try and make them feel that you are either a real person or a real brand that cares about their interests and their needs.
Yeah, that's cool. Again, great advice. And I'd like to talk about Twitter.
Okay.
If we can move on to that. Is it a dead platform? Is there still a need for businesses and people to be on Twitter? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
So Twitter's really interesting to me because I remember before even when I was just doing kind of consulting work and not in the social space about 5-10 years ago, I was really involved in Twitter. I just loved Twitter. I was really excited about it. I can tell you that if you can gain an audience on Twitter, you can get some awesome clicks through links. I think that's really, really important. If you have articles or you've got, it's a lot easier to get people to click through than getting them to go through your bio on Instagram.
Yeah, of course.
With that said, I don't know. I'm not so excited about these days. They are adapting and evolving. I believe they just won out a bid against Facebook for the NFL to do coverage of the NFL. So I think that the idea was that Facebook wanted to put it directly in your feed, like the games. And I think oddly enough, even though Twitter is even more mobile than Facebook, Twitter won that. But I think that's because people talk and interact more on Twitter. Yeah. I think that's an important aspect of Twitter is the ability to in real time interact with your audience, right? You can retweet them. It's like having a conversation, as opposed to just sending out a brand message, right? Instagram is much more of telling a message to people. I think Twitter is much more conversational, Yeah. So yes, I think it has a home. I think that it's constantly changing. They're changing their algorithms so that they can put in more ads and things along those lines, quote unquote, try and present you with more content that you're interested in. But that also is applicable to what part of the world you live in. Okay. So when we talk about Facebook or Twitter, I think it's really important to understand that, when I'm in the States, okay, Instagram and Snapchat kind of are king these days. I mean, Facebook is king because it's just so big. But when I talk about like what's exciting to me, Instagram and really, really Snapchat. But when we look at kind of new emerging markets, so I spent a lot of time in Southeast Asia. There is a huge emerging market here. They have yet to have some sort of 800-pound gorilla come out of this part of the world, but it's going to come. But this part of the world does not use, I mean, this is where I'm at right now, does not use Google, for example, for search. They use Facebook and Twitter for search. That Facebook is the largest driver of search traffic in Southeast Asia, astronomically above Google. So are there homes for Twitter? Is there space in it still? Absolutely. I mean, there's absolutely space in it still. But I would say if you are looking to be on the cutting edge and on the cusp of what's going to happen, I would keep an eye on Twitter. I would be involved with it a little bit, but I wouldn't dive so deeply into it. With that said, certain people do phenomenally with it. Phenomenally. I'll give you an example. All the facts Twitter accounts, like Uber Facts. Anything that's really brief and easy, But if you have like a long form message to tell people, I don't think Twitter's your home. I just don't.
Okay. And because Twitter have got Periscope as well, isn't it?
Twitter is Periscope. Yeah.
Right.
Periscope is owned by Twitter.
I tried Periscope. I did try with that, but I don't think there was many people. It was literally when it first came out. There wasn't many people on it, and I kind of just didn't really get much from it. But I suppose it's something I could give another go. I mean, do you think Periscope's another one that businesses could be using as well?
Sure. I think Periscope is probably great for quote unquote gurus. And I'm not trying to like slight the term guru, but I think that it's, if you like are someone who gets paid to speak, or if you're a vlogger, it'd be interesting to try out Periscope as a kind of new medium, right? Or, but I think, Facebook's reaction to that is Facebook Live,
Facebook
right?
Live,
Yeah. And so if we want to circle back to like a couple of years ago, I remember Vine came out, right? And don't get me wrong, Vine has done decently, but pretty quickly afterwards, Instagram released Instagram Video, right? And that kind of changed the landscape for Vine in many regards. I think, just as a general thought here, actually, very often people kind of pitch business ideas to me, ask me if they think something will work. If your business idea is something that a multi-billion-dollar company can integrate into their platform within a day of coding, I would not, unless you have a lot behind you, try to do it.
That's awesome advice. That really is. Nothing worse. Nothing. Actually, it's funny you say that because I was having a very similar conversation. In fact, it's the exact conversation we've just had there with the guy I was meeting on Tuesday. He was saying one of his partners, it's just happened to him. He spent ages developing this product. He told his friend about it, and then before he knew it, when he launched the same day, I can't remember what company it was, but they launched exactly the same thing, and it just blew up.
And
I've just wasted $100,000 and 6 months.
Yeah. I mean, so like, here's a perfect example. So, I worked with a startup that I won't talk about, but they've actually done quite well. They've raised a lot of my, 9-figure valuation, but it's literally for shopping, like Instagram, but for shopping instead. If Instagram really, really wanted, especially now they're owned by Facebook, let's make it clear. Instagram could very easily integrate a buy button through it. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's something that happens very soon. And that $200 million startup would all of a sudden have a huge competitor in the space, and they would have a really hard time transferring that audience over. With that said, there are examples of that. So there was another company, I forget the name, I was reading about them the other day, that launched around the same time Snapchat did. And Snapchat's real technology initially is that like everything's encrypted and it disappears, right? Snapchat has done a phenomenal job being consumer facing. They've done a phenomenal job with millennials, Generation Y. But this other company, and I'm embarrassed, I forget the name, but they were dead in the water. Their encryption software is infinitely higher than Snapchat's. It's much more anonymous, much more, it works much better. But so now they just got bought out, and what the person, the major equity holder now is doing is he's pitching it for Fortune 500 companies. Let's say you and I are two CEOs, and we want to talk about insider trading, or we want to talk about what's happening, like a business deal. But I don't want any trail of that to happen. I don't want any trace of that to happen. It just disappears, right? And it's gone forever. So my point is that, like, if you have already done your best to build something and some multi-billion-dollar corporation has released the same thing as you, try and find a new audience for that same product that multi-billion-dollar corporation doesn't target or doesn't care about. And that'd be the way to go.
It's not to say it can't be done. It just needs to be placed in the right, put in the right position, in the right place. So
absolutely.
And I mean, we spoke about LinkedIn before, and it's something that I'm getting heavily involved with at the minute for the first time in a long time. But generally, it's quite underutilized. I mean, do you feel LinkedIn can be used by anyone, or is it just for professionals?
I think it can be used by anyone. With that said, I think that there are, certain things that do better on it, right? If you own a business, I mean, it can actually be used by anyone. Let me take it back. If you are looking for a job, obviously LinkedIn can be a fantastic home for you. But if you own any product or sell any service that is, even if it's consumer facing, it can work. But like, especially if you have a B2B business, LinkedIn is amazing for you, right? You can identify, you and I spoke about this the other day, but let's say I believe there's someone on Founder has a company called Timely, I believe. And right, it's like a yoga studio, I believe.
I think they do. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'll give them a little plug there. I think, and it's beautifully put together. They, from everything I've seen, they've done a fantastic job. But LinkedIn would be an awesome place for them, right? Because what their software does is it's time management, I believe, for like bookings at yoga studios. Now that can probably be applicable to any business, but it'd be a fantastic way to find yoga studio managers and yoga studio owners and have a direct line of access to them in a way that you never, ever, ever would have before.
Yeah.
So yes, I think that everyone should be involved in LinkedIn, just because from a professional standpoint, I think that people look at your LinkedIn a lot, right? I think that's important to just look professional through LinkedIn. Yeah.
And I mean, how do you feel people could really leverage LinkedIn to benefit their companies and businesses?
So what we do, what my company does, our kind of core competency is like identifying target audiences and then bring them in to become customers or users, right? And so LinkedIn is a perfect home for that. So I would look at like who is, whatever you're selling, even if it's you're selling yourself, you don't have to be a business. If you're selling yourself and you are an awesome, I don't know, anthropologist, I don't know, like let's pick something pretty obscure, right? Like you could go onto LinkedIn and go find museums, that might be, and find a direct line of access to them. And if you presented yourself correctly, you might get a chance to actually speak to them in a way you wouldn't normally. So I think that the reality with LinkedIn is take a moment, write down 10 ideas of what you think your target audience is, and then pick the top 3, and kind of Venn diagram it, if you will, find the ones that you think are best, and then go search for them. There are ways on LinkedIn, and I'll let people kind of look into this themselves a bit, but, where you can basically pretend that you're an HR rep, right? And that you want to hire people. And that will kind of give you access to the lists of people that have themselves listed under certain jobs.
Yeah.
So if you're selling to startups and entrepreneurs, you can go find them. If you're looking for entrepreneurs, I would say to search for CEOs and presidents of people that own companies that are less than 5 people. Everyone's a CEO when you have a startup.
Everyone.
Everyone. I think that's funny. I'm a CEO, but I'm also a janitor, and I'm also, like a CTO and a you know what I mean? Like, not anymore. I mean, there's other people involved with me now, but do you see what I'm saying? Like, initially, you play every role. So I think it's really funny when, of course you're a CEO. Everyone's a CEO.
I think one of my favorite features on LinkedIn is on the pro accounts, if you sign up to a pro account, you can actually click on someone's profile, and if they've enabled it, you can actually direct message them.
Yeah. So I mean,
I've never seen access to people like that before on a social media platform, like specifically to a single person.
Yeah, I mean, so there's two sides to that. One is that I think that one thing that's awesome about LinkedIn is that it shows you all like your mutual connections, right? So you can get one of those people to kind of basically endorse you or get an introduction, right? So like if I wanted to meet you and I had never spoken before, I'd say, oh, well, like who's me? Oh, I see we both are friends with Nathan Chan, right? Like, and I'd message Nathan and be like, oh my God, Sam, how do we, can you link us? And if you want to pay for it, absolutely. Then I think that's a fantastic way to directly connect with people. But if you don't have the money to do that and you want to just kind of like on a very basic level, that's an awesome way to see what your real network is like, right? Like 6 degrees of separation or whatever that is, right? Like I think that people think like, oh, I don't know any people that work in venture capital, or I don't know any people that are tax attorneys. These are all problems that entrepreneurs run into, right?
Yeah.
I bet you if you got 500 plus Facebook friends and you have your Facebook and your LinkedIn connected, and you start connecting on LinkedIn with all of the people that you are on Facebook, I bet you'll find all those people within 1 or 2 degree connections away, and you can get an introduction to them.
Because I tried a similar. I say similar when I think about 800 friends on Facebook at the time, but they were people that were sort of in my local area that I'd grown up with and that I was working with. I was in the army as well, so a lot of guys from up and down the country and everything else. But then someone told me that if you add 50 people a day, but people in networks that have got the same interest as you, all of a sudden you've built a network of people in your Facebook. But it took such a long time just to build a network or find networks of people, and then I found that they weren't really engaging anyway. Like there's so many, it was nowhere near as effective as the response I get through LinkedIn. Put it that way. When it comes to networks.
Absolutely. Well, I was going to say, well, with Facebook, you can't really target it in that exact regard, and people are not like looking for. To be very honest with you, unless that you have been introduced to me or a connection has come through something like Founder Club, right, on Facebook, if you message me about business, I actually don't take you seriously at all, right? Yeah. Like if you message me, and I can't tell you how many people send me things, whether it be, I won't even get into that, but like, I don't, now if somebody messages me and says, hey, I have something I'd love to chat with you about. Can I grab your email from you? I'd love to send you an email. That's a fantastic way to do it through Facebook, right? But if you just cold message me, pitching me on something, I'm pretty unlikely to take you seriously. But LinkedIn is a platform where that seems very normal to me, right? And that seems very acceptable. So yeah, I think people, you brought it up, but I think people don't give LinkedIn enough credit. I think that they need to dive into it and flesh it out a little bit more. I wish I had more advice. It's just I've definitely dealt with lead generation through LinkedIn for sure, but I have not. It's not my home these days. I'm not involved with it on a daily basis. So that's about as far as I can go into it.
No, well, let's move on to something I know you're excited about. Is Snapchat.
Yeah.
I mean, gone are the days where it's just 14-year-old girls using Snapchat. I mean,
also those 14-year-old girls are now 19-year-old girls, right?
Yeah. Hey, that's another interview, right? How can entrepreneurs and business owners utilize Snapchat, and what sort of content should they be sharing on this platform? Okay,
so you said it, but I will preface again. I am super excited about Snapchat.
Yeah.
And it's partially because it very recently, for lack of a better term, clicked for me, right?
Yeah.
And I think that new forms of social media have to click for you. They just have to. There's a day where you go, oh my God, I get it. Like I see why people like this. I see why people are obsessed with it. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense to you at all. And if it doesn't make sense to you, you're probably not going to keep an interest in it. So you're probably not going to do a great job with it. So how can entrepreneurs and business owners utilize Snapchat? All right. So we'll start with how to build an audience. Okay. And I think that the first most important thing is, again, hammer this home straight from Gary Vee, but leverage the audience you have other places and bring them over to Snapchat. I would actually aggressively do that as much as you could now, because Snapchat is probably a couple years out from drastically changing their algorithm so that you don't reach your audience in the way that Facebook has been now for a couple years, and Instagram has recently changed over to, made it harder to reach your audience because they want you to pay. I think Snapchat's probably a bit far off from that. So the reason that Snapchat is super exciting to me is because I think that for myself, I grew up in, what everyone calls the information age. Well, I think everyone should be ready for the information age to be over. I think what's coming next is the experiential age. I think that virtual reality, augmented reality, experiencing things in real time, Facebook Live, Periscope, Snapchat. This is where things are going. The younger generation, which very rapidly are becoming consumers with expendable income, are going to they're interested in short form content. They're interested in very short form. Snapchat, I think, up to 10 seconds now,
Yeah.
And now they've added memories so you can have a page that people go back to. But Snapchat is bridging the gap between information and experience. The fact that information disappears means that you have to truly consume it, right? So it is going to, I think, be a big bridge for people into understanding AR, augmented reality, these Snapchat filters on people's faces and, these things. That's why it's super exciting to me, because it's involved in a space that I think is going in 5 years, the next 5 years, is going to be the biggest play in the digital media world, which is going to be, the experiential age, So that's what I find really exciting about it. And that's why Facebook is pushing Facebook Live so much, because consumers are saying they want stuff real time or short form. That's it. And then, so what type of content should they be using on this platform? I think that the reality is that with Snapchat, you need to be hyper aware that you only have a set amount of time for that content, unless you're one of the major brands that has one of those branded channels, and you get to, that's a bit different. But for the average person, people want to see a day in the life. People want to see behind the scenes. They want to see, BTS behind the scenes stuff. They want to get access that they don't have in other regards. What we do, I'll give you an example. So we own a content network that is pretty niche, but has, around 500,000 followers, about 500,000 followers on Instagram. Now, the content that we provide through Instagram for that is like finished pieces, right? So this is consumer facing finished pieces. Like, this is it. This is the done product that you love. But we transferred over to Snapchat, and then we give behind the scenes of that. Okay, the content network has to do with fandom and cosplay and video games and all that, right? So if there's a photo shoot that we have a creative director do, right? That finished piece goes on Instagram, those finalized photos, edited, beautiful, that's it. But then Snapchat shows the behind the scenes of that photo shoot, right? Shows the cosplay model getting dressed, not like inappropriately, but like, putting that together, So I think that the type of content can be much more. Remember that with Snapchat, you're really talking directly to an audience. When that person views that snap, they think you're talking to them one-on-one, right? And that's partially because you don't get to see how many other people are viewing that snap. On Instagram, if you have 8 million followers and you post, I know you're not talking to me. I mean, you better do a damn good job convincing me that you're talking directly to me. On Snapchat, you could be getting a million, DJ Khaled getting 7 million, 8 million views a snap. And when I watch his snap, he's talking directly to me, and I have no idea how many other people are viewing that. None. So I think that's your opportunity to really, really get engaged with your audience and find out what they're interested in. I think that people get freaked out because there are no call to actions in Snapchat, right? So you have to create your own. You can write whatever you want on that screen, right? On whatever, and I would do that, and I would tell people, screenshot this and check out our site. Screenshot this if you like this photo or if you love this photo shoot, right? Just to create engagement with your audience so they feel that you're actually involved with them. Send us questions. We'll answer them right now. That's a fantastic one, right? And so that's applicable for a myriad of different things. Any sort of industry you're in. Send us questions you have to ask. We're going to do a Q&A right now, an AMA. Ask me anything, and we'll answer it right here on Snapchat. And they can get an answer immediately right there. They don't have to wait for you to write a blog post with all the answers in it later. So yeah, I mean that's kind of my view on it.
It kind of it takes out the so-called experts and gurus as well, because it's real. You can't hide from it, And I think the point you brought up there was, which really it made me think about it in a completely different way, just from when you just said it then, was people actually have to truly engage for that 10 seconds with you, because it's never going to be there again. Yeah. That's powerful. That's such a powerful concept. And I never really thought about it that way,
Yeah, I'll give you an example. We could go on Facebook right now, and we could go set up an ad campaign, and we could be paying almost nothing per view, right? Snapchat ads start at $20, what we call CPM, cost per mil. So for every 1,000 views, Snapchat charges you at a minimum currently $20 and up to $40 for an interactive ad. I can tell you, as someone who's very involved in this space, that is astronomically more expensive then any other platform will charge you for 1,000 views. Okay. What that means is that they are aware that metric-wise, analytic-wise, that these people are truly engaged with that content, that they're truly excited about it, and that it's harder to build an audience on that platform. So Snapchat originally, you had to hold down the button the entire time to view a snap. Now, if that's not engagement, I don't know what is.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. Yeah.
And now that obviously has changed a bit, but you're still talking about, if you can really get your audience on Snapchat, when I talk about commercial intent, if you get people that are really engaged and excited about what you're doing on Snapchat, you can really, really sell to them. You can really, really, really sell to them.
Yeah, that's unbelievable advice. I mean, I was scribbling away there as you're talking. James, that was amazing, man. I mean, we're running out of time now, so we're going to have to wrap it up. But before we go, I just want to thank you for coming on and just sharing your knowledge and experience with us, because even I got a lot from that interview, and I'm sure the people listening would have got a lot from that. So thank you very much for coming on today. And before we wrap it up, where can people find you and how can they get in touch with you online? Yeah.
So, I mean, the easiest way is, if you want any of my social media channels, it's Jameson or James on Camp, JamesOnCamp, and that's for all my social media profiles except for Facebook. But if they want to email me, it'd be james@tippingpointagency.com. That's the easiest way to get a hold of me. And I'll definitely respond as much as I can. And I think, I want to thank you for having me and thank everyone for listening, because the reality is I get so excited about social. Yeah. I'm more than happy to ramble about it for 45 minutes. So I apologize if I'm sure that there's some serious rambling in there, but hopefully people can pick up some nuggets and tidbits of really, really valuable information.
That was awesome, mate. It was awesome. And guys, just as always, I'll post those links in the show notes, so don't worry about scribbling them now. They'll all be in the show notes once we publish this show. And that's it, James. Once again, thank you so much for coming on today. That was knowledge bomb after knowledge bomb of gold dust there, my friend. So thank you very much, and we'll speak to you soon.
All right, thanks again, Stan. Bye.
Okay, what an amazing show, and thank you, James, again, just for coming on and just giving us over an hour of your time and just really going into a lot of detail on how we can actually utilise these platforms. And guys, I can't emphasise enough how good James is at this. So if you are having troubles, then please either get in contact with us and I'll put you in touch with him, or contact him directly through the links in the show notes below, because he really can help you and make a difference with your social media campaigns, your advertising, and just everything we covered in the interview, plus more as well. We kind of just scratched the surface, because he has got such an in-depth knowledge of how this whole industry works. So I cannot recommend him enough. So if you are having issues, guys, then please link up with James via through myself or in the show notes below. And I want to touch on, before we finish up now, a bit more about the podcast and what we're doing here. And I've touched on it in the previous episodes, but what we are very new still in the podcast world. We've only released 7 episodes now. We've got loads more in the back burner ready to go, and we've just lined up another 18 interviews with some really good high flying entrepreneurs who are massive influencers in their fields. And guys, what I've done is I've gone out and I've actually gone into forums and networks that I'm in, and I'm speaking to people and asking them what are their problems, and I'm now putting some of these questions in the podcast. So I found this is a very effective way for me to communicate the issues that people are genuinely having when they're in their own startups and in their companies. So if you are having issues, guys, with anything involving your startup, because we are interviewing guys across the board through many different niches in many different industries, so no question is going to be out of context with any certain guest, because there will be someone that we're interviewing that can help you. So please, I urge you, if you are having issues, guys, just get in contact with us and we can ask those questions for you. And if we can help you as well, I'll be more than happy to answer your questions for you as well. And I'll still ask them in the podcast, so you've got another person's point of view on it. And that's it. I mean, one last point I would like to go through actually would be the new and noteworthy section we're trying to hit up on the podcast, on the iTunes podcast at the minute. So all you got to do, if you are enjoying our content, guys, and you are liking what we're putting out there and it's helping you, then all I ask is you go over to, you got the link in the show notes below for the MyCoda podcast in the iTunes library. Hit that link, guys, and just go to subscribe to the podcast, and then just rate and review it for us. And that is it. It will take you 2 minutes of your time, but it will make such a difference for us, and it will help us get one step closer to getting that new and noteworthy section. So that's a big mission of ours at the minute, guys, and we need all the help we can get. So we really appreciate you doing that. And that is it, guys. So again, thank you so much for tuning in today. I know you would have got a lot from that session, because I know I did. And look forward to the next interview, guys. So I'll leave it there. Thank you so much for listening in, and I'll see you for the next session of the MyCoda podcast.